Welcome back to Retail Riches. I'm your host, Christian, and today I have Aaron Emmel, a partner of mine and Chris's on a few deals here in Columbia. He was coming into town, and I had to make sure I snagged him up and drug him down to the studio and make sure I get a good interview from him.
Yeah, I came up here with Chris to scope out a couple of the deals we partnered on, and was working at the coffee shop down the street, and Christian accosted me to come in and do this interview, so let's do it.
I had to hold him at gunpoint, man. This is hard guy to get a hold of.
He's a big guy. He said to get in the car. I'm not going to ask any questions.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, so I wanted to bring him on, and he has definitely a different approach to being a part of real estate than most people. Most people talk to are very, very active, and they're out like hunting deals and this and that. And Aaron comes from a completely different field, and I wanted him to come on and tell his story and his journey and how he got into real estate. So
yeah, absolutely.
I guess we'll kind of take it back to give us some background information. Where are you originally from? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so if we go all the way back to the beginning, so I'm a native of St. Augustine, Florida.
Okay.
Where I drove up from with Chris yesterday. So born and raised there, just a local guy in the community. Went through school in St. Augustine and kind of started to find my path going through high school, and decided I wanted to pursue the field of pharmacy. So, went to pharmacy school at the University of Florida. Actually stayed local to do that because they had a campus in Jacksonville.
Oh, sweet.
And, went through my various clinical rotations through school. If you go prior to that, I stayed local to do community college. So kind of took the, I'd say, efficient path to get into that graduate school, and a low-cost path, thankfully. And I'll talk a little bit about my financial journey too, because there's a lot of lessons learned that hopefully your viewers can learn from too.
Yeah.
I made some mistakes, but still had a relatively easy path, to get into a good profession as a pharmacist. And
what kind of led you down that path?
Yeah, probably not the right reason. I was big into music actually in high school. So
okay.
I was a jazz musician and played brass instruments. And,
oh, really?
And my initial thought was, okay, I'm going to be a jazz musician or an educator.
Yeah.
And that was the thought process going through high school, and I was connected with the local college in Jacksonville that had a big jazz studies program, so I thought that's what I was going to do. And, through a little bit of coaching from some mentors, just thinking about life in general, perhaps it's a great hobby, but probably not the best career to pursue. So when I started to really step back and think about what would be a good career path for me, it just happened to be one of my classmates that was also in the music program was going on to pharmacy school. He was a year ahead of me. And he told me, hey, listen, this is a good career where you make a great income, and it's not all that much school. It's not like going to medical school where you do 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency, plus or minus fellowship or even more. With pharmacy, you can do as little as 2 years at the time of undergrad, associate's degree kind of school, and then go on to a 4-year program. And right out of the gate, you're making a decent living. So I went into the career just with that mindset. Looking back on it and having gone through the experience of becoming a pharmacist, I learned that the right reason to do it is for the betterment of other people, which I've become pretty passionate about. And we'll talk a little bit about the side business. It's really becoming more of a real business for pharmacy education, where I'm really intent on making people think up front that if you're going to do something like this, it's mission driven, to help other people. Which plays a lot into the real estate stuff too, and I'm sure you hopefully are considering that when you're generating leads and finding people that have situations that you can help.
For sure.
Through an acquisition. But the same is true, and anything you do in healthcare is all about patients at the end of the day. So yeah, my initial reasons for getting in, not the best, but thankfully I righted course. I righted course, not too long after getting into the field and really seeing.
Well, and I think that starts like a lot of people's. Yeah, I mean, that starts a lot of people's journey into really anything, right? It's like, well, first of all, I need to make a living. Like, I love everybody, but if I can't make a living, then I can never help anybody anyways. So then it's like, and then you kind of get into it and you build that like passion for, helping people and, providing value to other people's life, like it's the goal with life.
Absolutely, man. And, when we were talking about just before this, because I didn't really prep for this at all, what the heck are we going to talk about? I started thinking too about my journey and what's gotten me here now and what I'm doing now professionally and for investing. But when I go back to really what was the most fulfilling and I was the most passionate about, it was really that first real job I got out of pharmacy school. So I got done with pharmacy school. I stayed in my local community and worked for the local hospital in St. Augustine and had the wonderful opportunity to become kind of their lead clinical pharmacist. And I specialized in critical care. And I did that for almost 10 years. And I tell you, I loved that job. And I still miss it. I still dream about it. Half the time I wake up thinking I'm still, in that role. And it really was fulfilling. I mean, everything I did every day, made a difference. And I met a lot of amazing people and amazing families that I still stay in touch with to this day.
Wow.
But at some point, I started to really feel like I was growing out of that position. I was still young and, I got a lot of life ahead of me and I was beginning to start a family. I'm married to my high school sweetheart, but we waited a while before having kids. And by the time we made that decision, I realized I probably should try to achieve more, to really kind of establish a legacy for the family. And also that job, wore on me and it would wear on anybody mentally, just the crises you're seeing on a daily basis. And I was obsessive. I'd wake up in the middle of the night worrying about the patients, calling to follow up on things and check on people. And that's not sustainable mentally for long. So, to kind of continue on my journey, I was trying to think, okay, what can I do that's maybe a next step in my career? So I went back to get more education. So I went and got a master's in healthcare administration from the University of North Florida, which is a really cool experience because not only did it kind of prepare me to maybe take more of an admin role in a hospital, which comes with a lot more responsibility and, better income. But I learned so much about business, which really, in kind of preparing me for my interest in real estate, a lot of those didactic learnings were applicable to, underwriting and real estate as a business and just understanding business models and the thought of a business person really helped. But regardless, I got that education and was lucky enough to stay in the health system, and they gave me an administrative role where I oversaw a clinically integrated network. And I know this isn't a healthcare audience specifically, but it was an incredible opportunity to learn, take on a ton of responsibility, really grow my understanding of healthcare in general, which I did for a couple of years, but it was a brutal job in terms of just work-life balance and stress and demands and, didn't really feel like it was a good long-term strategy for the work-life balance with the family.
It sounds like you learned a
ton, which again, it helped me build a network of people. It helped me expand my experience that I could apply in numerous different avenues. And I'll kind of segue a little bit more of that here in a moment, but I got to see my boss, who's a vice president of the health system, and his boss is the CEO, and the amount of stress and pressure they were under.
Oh, yeah.
And that was kind of my thought was, I'll go on to be the CEO of the health system, which comes with an incredible income, certainly puts you on the path to leave a legacy for your family. That's not a life I wanted to live after seeing it, firsthand, right? And in your audience, obviously, most people get into real estate investing so they can have that time. And as I started to get older too and had my first kid, there's nothing more important than time. Money can't buy it. It can certainly give you some more freedom, but you don't get that time back. So, go ahead.
And kind of with real estate, you can buy some of that time back by paying people to manage the properties. You can. you can take this from the actual income from the property and then pay that forward to somebody to essentially oversee all of the like day-to-day operations. You know, you can find good contractors to run through the project. I mean, we're seeing that now as we're going through like Hardin Street. Me and Chris aren't there every day, every other day. Like, that was another, like, this is not sustainable. We got to the end of North Main, I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to keep happening, buddy. Like,
I know, Chris was gone every other week. I couldn't hang out with him. He's coming up here, leaving his family and kids at home.
Crazy.
You're at the property.
I mean, for him, I couldn't imagine making that trip like constantly.
Yeah.
That's insane, man. Yeah. And I just told him, like, we got to the end of it, I'm like, there's no way this is the path moving forward. Like, there's no way this is the answer to any other problems. But yeah, so with real estate, you can start, as long as you delegate, you know, enough funds aside, you know, you're not like trying to squeeze every ounce of every penny out of the property. You can delegate that and start creating this time where a normal job or a lot of businesses, you can't, you know.
Yeah.
You know, the business, especially the business I was in the past, I was the business, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, if I didn't go to work, everything, if I didn't go, it just stopped all of a sudden. And so, yeah. And then it sounds like as well from your, you know, background, you learned a lot about how every business is essentially the same, and it has the same building blocks and foundation, no matter what industry.
It really is. I mean, there's, you know, operations, you know, compliance, and project management. I mean, that's kind of, no matter what you're doing, those are going to be key elements. Those are certainly key elements in real estate.
For sure.
And also framing everything in a value proposition for your customer. But yeah, so, you know, I kind of got burnt out in that admin role, and I made a pivot to go into the pharmaceutical industry, because you know, with my background clinically, and then my understanding of health systems, I was a really good candidate to work in medical affairs in the pharmaceutical industry, which is a very flexible job. You know, when somebody has the level of scientific acumen that I've got, and an understanding of the healthcare landscape, and these pharmaceutical companies look for people like that to be kind of bridges between the company and the medical community for, you know, information exchange.
I mean, what does that look like? I mean, you know, you say, what does that look like on like a day-to-day? Like, what do you like do?
Well, that's the wonderful thing about the job that was a perfect pivot for me, from a time freedom perspective, is you're really getting paid for your expertise.
Okay.
And you're not punching a clock. You know, I you know, it's not, you know, at the health system, I'd be at the health system at 7 in the morning. If I was lucky in the admin role, I'd leave at 5, and then I'd go back in the evening for a physician committee meeting.
Oh, wow.
You know, that was many days of the week like that. And that just wasn't something that gave me freedom to do. So the kids had something at school, you know, I couldn't go.
Yeah.
If I rewind the clock back to when I was a pharmacist, you know, there's a little more flexibility, but, you know, there's nobody, the hospital's got to work 365 days a year, right? So you're working holidays, you're working weekends, and it's a tough sacrifice, you know, for your family. And don't get me wrong, these are great jobs that most people would kill to have.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you live the life, and you start to see how time goes on, and you want to think about how to be more free. So the pharmaceutical industry job is a very attractive one. And again, you know, this audience may not be in the know for that, but, you know, day to day, it's all about understanding what the needs of the company are, what the needs of the medical community are in terms of that information exchange, whether it's education, partnership for research. And, you know, you literally get paid to build a network of people that you can go out and have conversations with and exchange that information and bring intelligence back to the company so they know where to put their research dollars or their education material dollars.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it means I can execute on the requirements of the job on my own schedule. You know, I do travel around to meet with people, but I determine when to travel. Yes, we have internal meetings we've got to be at, and I was on a call yesterday in the car with Chris. I rode with Chris because I said, hey, listen, I got to be on some internal meeting calls, but hey, if I ride shotgun with you, I'll just take them in the car.
Oh, wow.
You can't do that when you're working as a pharmacist for a hospital.
No, yeah. That's not how that works.
So, I took a pay cut to move into the pharmaceutical industry, but to gain that freedom.
Yeah.
And also, again, we're kind of jumbled here, but I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset. So I had started a couple of businesses during my time working for the health system. I started a medication management business where I had contracts with insurance companies to help patients with their medications, essentially. I started an analytics company, to help health systems that were doing similar value-based programs like I was an administrator for. And these businesses didn't really take off. They would have been viable had I really went all in and focused on them, but I was afraid to do that. I wanted to maintain my income and kind of do that lean business model, and I didn't see them out long enough to really achieve success. So once I had pivoted to the pharmaceutical industry and had a little more freedom, I started to think, hey, I have the bandwidth now because of this freedom to do some extra things. Yeah. So, one of the things that we've talked a lot about, was the online education business that I started.
Yeah.
So I essentially built an entire online course with a learning management system for people that want to become pharmacy technicians. And there's a national certification they can get that makes them eligible to work in most states. And I said, hey, you know what? There's a need in the marketplace for a really good online course to help people do that. So I built it and from scratch. And I really didn't outsource anything. I learned how to develop a website. I learned how to deal with all the configurations of the website to build this learning management system.
That's intense, man.
You learn about all the compliance issues you got to consider with information security, cybersecurity, all the other business considerations. So that's been a really fun experience because I've learned how to really operate a business as a solopreneur. And may not have been the most efficient way to do it, but I've learned so much doing it, and the lean nature in which I was able to launch that business. I mean, that business runs today and it does really well. The operating margin is great because I did things so efficiently. And now I have enough revenue that I'm outsourcing things and bringing in independent contractors and hopefully going to hire some employees here soon as we continue to expand that business. And thanks to what I've learned in life to date, it wasn't about just making money. I mean, obviously it's doing well and it's changed the game for me and allowed me to obviously do some of these deals with you and Chris as a passive investor. But I approached it with the altruistic sense of wanting to do right for other people. And that business operates with that, mission and vision in mind. And that's what's made it so successful, and it gets such great reviews because I'm fully invested in the people that go through the course. That's awesome. I spend the time talking to them if they need to talk. If they need career guidance, even when they're done, I haven't turned it into a subscription model or anything. It's a one-time fee for the program for the students. But I stay in touch with them if they want and help them and mentor them well beyond the time they go through the course. So, that's one of the biggest lessons to me is if you approach anything you do with that mindset, it all comes back. We talked about that just before this interview.
For sure.
Right? So not everything has to be with the intent of the betterment of you financially or professionally. If you approach, life and your relationships with people with a genuine interest in them and helping them, good things come from that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. You always have to lead with value.
Absolutely.
And it feels good for yourself as well. There's that selfish part of it too, where it's like, feels good. It feels good to do something that hopefully impacts someone else's life in a positive way.
Yeah.
How huge or small that is, who knows? But doing that there's nothing like that.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes all the difference in the world between not liking what you do and going through the motions and people just viewing work as a necessity, right, to get through life. But when you wake up with a sense of that duty and fulfillment, it makes all the difference.
For sure.
So I guess that's kind of the convoluted story of me professionally and where I'm at now. So I'm in this unique space now, which I guess lends to the real estate discussion where, I'm still employed. And I'm at a point where I don't have to be. I choose to be because the employed work I do is interesting. I still enjoy it. I can still be a good employee and meet, the requirements or the responsibilities I have to my employer and enjoy it. And it comes with benefits, and I'm always risk averse. So I look, hey, if I leave the job, now I got to worry about insurance. If something happens with the business, I'm back to kind of square one. So there's been hesitancy to leave it from that sense, but I still enjoy doing it. So things are working. I'm doing that. I've got this business that's doing well. I fully acknowledge if I really were to go all in on the business, I could probably grow it and do better overall, but everything's working so good right now, it's kind of hard to rock the boat.
I think a lot of people knock like active income, especially in the real estate industry where they're like, it's terrible, I don't think they realize that's your biggest return on investment. The real estate is really like where to park the money once you've made it.
Oh yeah.
And hopefully, and it grows over the years, but like active income is far surpasses any return you'll ever get from real estate.
Yeah.
Like leaps and bounds, it's not even close.
Oh yeah, and I guess that's a great segue to talk about, the real estate interest. So I haven't always been good with money. I feel like I'm a smart guy. I thought I was really smart with money when I was younger and was very interested in the stock market and read all the, books that everybody reads with Benjamin Graham and Warren Buffett and The Intelligent Investor and all that stuff. But my decisions with money weren't so smart. So in pharmacy school, I'm looking forward to, oh my goodness, I'm going to make 6 figures at 23 when I get done, and I'm going to have great income. So what do? Before I even graduate pharmacy school, I go buy a house with a mortgage that's what I'll just be able to afford once I get my job as a pharmacist, right? Buy a brand new car, take out a loan to pay for that brand new car, which again, when I look at my debt service, I'm maxing out what I'm going to be able to afford. Holy cow, if I could go back to 23-year-old me and not make those decisions, I'd be in a different ballgame even today.
Yeah.
But lessons learned, lessons that I'll pass on to my children for sure when it's time.
Yeah.
But, we did that and bought our first house in 2006. Really, if I almost could have picked the day, to peak the market, that's pretty much when we bought the house. So, into my 30s, my net worth was negative into my 30s.
Wow.
So it took a long time to recover from that. And, I'm not a huge Dave Ramsey fan, but, if I could go back in the day and approach the expenses portion of his teachings at that age, oh my goodness, the ball game would be so different. But anyway,
I think a lot of people everyone always tells you buy a house because this is going to be a great investment and and I don't think they realize that's probably the worst investment you'll ever make.
It's a terrible investment
ever,
right? And the emotions are, look how fast prices are going up. If I don't buy a house now, I'll never afford one, right? And it's terrible. The market cycle, you can't time it. You should never let that emotion make the decision.
No. It's more of a financial decision. Am I financially ready to afford a house and everything that comes along with owning a house?
Yeah.
It's not like renting where you call somebody when something goes out, washer and dryer's out. It's like, okay.
Oh yeah, the concept of capital expenditures, right, isn't there. It's like, okay, I'm going to have this mortgage P&I payment, and then you got insurance, you got repairs and maintenance, you got CapEx, you got all these expenses, and it adds up over time, right?
Oh, for sure.
And you don't consider that. But, regardless.
You don't save any money.
You don't save money. And I didn't save, I've always done the 401k match and all that, but it never really built anything outside of that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pause because my nose is running. We'll edit this part out.
Oh, you're good, dude.
That's what happens when you get old. Your nose just runs for no reason. But, you know, anyway, to kind of get back to the investment story, it took a while to dig out from that. And, you know, made a good income later in that pharmacy portion of the career, and certainly once I became an administrator, and then with the addition of the side business, certainly helped me dig out of that hole.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I really started to step back and say, okay, I enjoy what I do, but I want to plan to become independent of all this. And again, this comes from that risk-averse mindset where, okay, if the doomsday comes and I lose my job, and the external threats to the business I have, which again, I could talk about to a different audience, but I do perceive that business may not be viable long-term for various reasons. And if that comes to fruition and I lose my job, I want to be set, and I don't want to have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I basically wanted to be financially independent, which doesn't mean you retire, but it means you've got that peace of mind.
Exactly.
You know, if I get tired of working for the man, so to speak,
yeah,
I can say goodbye. It's fun.
It's that freedom, man. You want to be able to push those chips in a little bit here and there.
And running a business is stressful. I mean, even though the business could be extremely passive, if I chose for it to be passive, you still have stress. There's risk to having a business. There's things that happen with the website that I might have to troubleshoot. If I'm even taking a vacation somewhere, you're always worrying about it. So it'd be wonderful to get to that point where you have peace of mind that, you know what, if I decide I don't want to do any of this anymore, I don't have to. Then the problem is all my investments are in retirement account vehicles. So, and I'm still relatively young. I'm not quite a bit older than you, but I'm still feeling good. I'm still young, right?
Hey, look good, man.
If I wanted to retire in 2 or 3 years, I got money I can't touch without penalties for another 2 decades. And that's an issue. So when I stepped back, you know, a few years ago and said, okay, how can I start to build, you know, some assets that I can use for income if I wanted to in the next 5 to 10 years, for example, what is it? And real estate makes sense. You know, the real estate can be a great vehicle for cash flow with assets and capital that you don't have to deplete. So that was kind of the other thought process too, is I wanted to get to a point where I can have income to sustain life and continue to have that capital or continue to grow that capital so that my kids can have the same experience too.
Yeah.
And that's a whole talk for a different day. And I mean, I do believe, you know, that I need to be careful with parenting so they can be self-sustaining. But I also want to be able to leave them in a situation where they're safe.
For sure.
And we never know what's going to happen in this crazy world.
It's also leaving an example too.
Yes.
Because, I mean, if they don't see that you're willing to, because a lot of people think real estate's really risky. You know, and there is a lot of risk to it. Like, if you're not buying the right assets with, you know, business plans in mind, like, again, back to the house situation. I mean, just because you bought a house doesn't mean you got $100,000 in equity. You usually have zero equity. I got lucky. I bought just before I moved a year ago. So about 5 years ago, I bought my house, and we made like $120,000, but like unheard of. Like completely unheard of. My parents bought before '08, lost the house, lost everything. Multiple people that I know that held on through that, and they barely started seeing any equity at the same time that I did. And it was like crazy because I paid almost the same price that they paid for their house 10, 15 years previously. And it was like crazy. People think because you made money and they refinanced their house in the last couple of years that like, oh, I'm just going to keep buying houses. And this is like, no. Like this is a once in a long time type of deal. Like you don't see that ever, really. Like very few people see that, you know. It's not something to like be chasing after. I get a lot of people that ask me like, oh, well, how come you didn't buy a house? You know, like, why would I buy a house? Like, there's no scenario where like I go dump $100,000 as a down payment and then I get nothing for it. I just pay what I could rent a house for.
Oh yeah.
It's not even cheaper. And now again, if anything happens, like it just costs me. So yeah. And sorry, I'm getting off track, but yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely real estate's a good place to park some capital, but be smart.
Yeah, exactly. And that'll, I guess, lead to the story of why I've taken a passive approach here for now. So when I realized this a few years ago, this was probably something I should look into to start to build that, deployed asset base to have that income. I did all the mandatory self-education. I could quote probably 50 different books I've read on the topic and started to build an understanding of the art and science and fundamentals of real estate investing. And a lot of it's easy. A lot of it's just math in terms of understanding a deal and understanding the metrics of an investment. Mm-hmm. But then when it comes time to act, I kind of realized that it's probably not that feasible right now, especially in this environment we've been in the last couple of years where real estate's expensive, margins are very thin when you analyze a lot of investments. I found myself in this perpetual analysis paralysis.
Yeah,
right?
this saying, right?
I spent about a year reading all the books, building that didactic education, so to speak, building all my Excel spreadsheet models to do underwriting with, and bouncing from asset class to asset class in terms of what I'm going to do. I'd read a book and say, okay, single family residences, that's what I'm going to do. Get rich one house at a time, build wealth one house at a time, right? So, built that underwriting model. Every morning I'd go to Realtor or Zillow and look at all the MLS stuff and pick a few deals. And, in Northeast Florida right now, you're not going to meet that 1% or even 0.5% model in terms of your acquisition cost to rental rates.
No.
So when I realized that's not going to work without a lot of effort, small multifamily. Then same thing. Can't find any small multifamily deals, and it's like, okay, self-storage. And I just kept bouncing in my mind from asset class to asset class. And what I realized was, to really get a sound investment, and I'm very conservative, so when I underwrite a deal, at least on paper, I'm putting in a very conservative estimate of repairs and maintenance, CapEx, and I'm looking at the cash-on-cash return that I'm going to get, and do I really want to deploy an amount of capital I need to safely leverage a small, multifamily or single-family residence to make a 2 or 3% cash-on-cash return, at least without doing a ton of lead generation work. Sure. Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. And when you're making a couple $100 of cash flow a month, if you're lucky, it doesn't take but 1 or 2 problems to wipe that out for the year. Oh. And my mindset is I want to deploy my capital so I have dependable cash flow to get to that financially free mentality. So then what do you really have to do to get those better deals? You have to generate off-market leads. And when I look at my earning power as an employee, my earning power working on my business, does it make sense for me to pivot my effort to chase off-market deals just to improve the margins a little bit? Like, no, it really doesn't. So how do I get in the game? It's to be a passive partner. Mm-hmm. So then I start building, okay, how do you look at syndications? How do you vet out a sponsor? And I started looking at syndication deals and sponsor deals. And number one, a lot of times what you look at that's out there in your face, the deals are terribly underwritten. They're unrealistic. There's not documentation of the assumptions that were made or to support the assumptions that were made in the underwriting. And I just had a hard time convincing myself I was willing to lend to, deploy capital in that amount to somebody I don't know. Yeah. Right? So I started to feel really paralyzed, almost to the point where I was like, listen, I'm just going to keep putting money in index funds and just in my brokerage account aside from the retirement stuff and call it a day. Then I met Chris. Right? So Chris had moved to St. Augustine last year, and his kid was in my daughter's class, and we had a birthday party for my daughter, and his kid had come, and Chris was there, and I just started chatting with him, and we were just talking about life and everything, and he told me about his prior business he had executed, and that became obvious he was a commercial real estate developer and investor. And I told him about all my interests and said, man, I'm just having such a hard time finding something that works, and I don't think I have the time or appetite to be, an active investor. And we just started touching base with some property came up in town. We talked to each other about it, and maybe we partner on something. And I kind of learned when you're somebody like me that doesn't have construction knowledge, I can't walk into a building and look at it and figure real quick, okay, these are the types of improvements that are needed. This is going to be the CapEx cost. It's really important to find somebody to help guide you and mentor you and partner with you, right? So I mean, that's really how to smartly get in the game if you're not already doing this stuff. So we started talking and looking at deals, and when Chris had met you and was looking at the deals up here in Columbia, it was the first time, I looked at the underwriting of a deal and said, okay, this is actually conservative. And there's truth and honesty in this underwriting and transparency about what was unknown and what the risks were. And I had gotten to know Chris real well, right? So it was the first time I felt safe deploying the amount of capital that's needed, whether you're going to be a limited partner in a syndication or a JV partner. And I did it. So we went into the first deal, but you're still anxious because I'm like, listen, I know Chris pretty well, and I scooped him too. I was Googling. I knew where he was from, so I was like, let me look on the Department of Corrections website. History, right? So not only did I vet the deal, but I vetted him out the best I could. Even though we had become friends, I haven't told him yet. But I mean, you have to
surprise.
Do that. You have to do that. And then, when me and my family went on vacation, we stopped by here to finally check out that first property, and you see it in action. You see all the work that's being done. You see, I met you. And to just be there on site and see the operation and see the rehab in action, and this is real and tangible, and it made sense. And, I love the business model that you and him have built and the specific asset class you're looking at in a community where it makes sense, where the dollar amounts make sense, where there's enough room for things to go wrong,
for sure,
and not ruin your investment. And I think for me, for the foreseeable future, being a passive investor probably makes sense. And the biggest things I'm going to look for are honest and transparent underwriting, and that attitude of being extremely conservative. Because you can do all the due diligence in the world and do a proper inspection, but until you start to tear a building down, you don't know what's underneath the skin, right? So if you've got solid underwriting where you can take a hit, where you may lose building space, for example, right? And it doesn't destroy the deal because your underwriting was so conservative and your real lease rates you're realizing are better. And you were conservative in estimating what the market cap's going to be when you go to exit or refi. So those are like really important things for me as an investor. So that's kind of, I'm refining my mindset for the moment from, okay, I need to learn all I can learn about how to generate leads and do all these, marketing tactics to, okay, let me just really understand the business, really understand how to vet, a potential sponsor or business partner, and do that while I still have this incredible opportunity to earn. Because at the end of the day, if I can maximize my earning and then be smart with those earnings, so I've got capital to deploy in a sense that works, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So kind of pivoting from looking for deals to partnering, and then but you're still working, right? Like you're still vetting everything out. I mean, every deal, you still just because anybody brings you a deal, you don't just okay, yeah, what you wrote looks good. You do your research and you you have to completely vet the deal. I think a lot of people get kind of awestruck or something, and they're like, oh wow, I actually have a deal I can invest, and they just
start throwing money at it. And we're seeing that a lot now, where I mean, the event we were at last weekend, where they're literally talking about all these deals that are going to be falling apart. And I could just imagine the millions of dollars that people, of their hard-earned money that they've invested into those deals, because of the potential pro forma that somebody wrote up that wasn't conservative, but these people just didn't know to do their own underwriting and to vet these assumptions. They're just taking it for,
Oh, it's so important. And I mean, that's one thing you kind of learn when you really start to jump into the real estate community. And I mean, I've gone to meetups locally. I've joined message, groups and stuff like that on Facebook. And there's a lot of people that get into it, whether or not it's with intent, that either don't know what they're doing, but they're talking the game like they've been in it, or they're just unscrupulous characters, right? There's just a lot of those people in the real estate space. So when you look at a lot of these offerings, or you go to a conference and people walk up to you, scan my QR code and put you to their deal, and you look at it, it's like, okay, for one, from the outset, this looks a little too good. But for the people that don't know any better, they see, oh my goodness, I'll make a 10% cash on cash return and an internal rate of return of 22%, and they think, okay, I'm lucky to get 7 or 8% in the stock market these days. This makes sense, but unless you know who's going to be operating that deal, what their track record is, what their market research was that justified their assumptions for the lease rates and the market cap in the community, and how they assess the building and what the CapEx requirements are going to be. I mean, all that stuff has to be well understood. In my mind, you've almost got to recreate the underwriting on your own. So
I mean, you can use theirs as a guide. But
exactly. But you'd be crazy, especially, I don't come from money. Not that I had a tough childhood growing up, but I mean, everything I've done has been on my own earnings. I wasn't gifted money or anything like that. It's been hard earned. I'm not just going to give it to somebody I don't know and just trust that they know what they're doing. You have to put in the time to understand the structure of the deal and the assumptions and validate that it's correct and, importantly, conservative, because there's a lot of things you can't control. Again, you can't always know what's under the cover of the building, so to speak. You can't know what's going to happen in the world and the economy and the local community in the future. You need space to absorb a substantial, increase in the local market cap, or an issue that you just reasonably couldn't understand about the building.
Exactly.
Those things are really important.
Stuff happens.
If you ask the average person who maybe isn't that scrutinizing of an investor, that's done these LP deals and participated in these syndications, how many of them panned out the way that the marketing said they would? It's probably less often.
It's far in between. Especially over the last couple of years, because I mean, a lot of people did a lot of bridge debt and swore interest rates weren't going to go through the roof, and then they just skyrocketed, and now you can't refinance these and even pull equity out. Like you're refinancing just to lock in a rate so it doesn't keep climbing.
That was the first sign to me, with Chris, when all the discussions we had and how conservative he was in his investment mindset, and even when we were looking to do something, it was going to be with very little debt. In the first deal that I participated in as a partner with you two, no lending. I mean, the hard money piece of it, but that was a small portion of it. But you don't have the risk of, a large bank loan, and then something happens throughout the process. You don't get it leased out in time, and now you've got these payments due, or a balloon payment due at some point in the future. If you take that risk out of the picture, that made it a lot more comfortable for me to participate in that first deal, because I knew the risk was highly mitigated through that debt structure. And again, especially in these uncertain times.
For sure. And I tried to as well, because he would come to me, and I can't help but be honest, I just don't lie, and He's like, well, how many of these properties have you leased? I'm like, none.
Yep.
How are you so sure that we're going to get these rates? Because nowhere else is getting this. I don't know. Like, I know, but I can't prove it. And it's like, how do I, how do I put my money where my mouth is, really? And it was like, you know what? Like, if this doesn't plan out how I think it will, the last thing I want is for anyone else to be affected. And so that's why, on that one, like, kind of proving my own assumptions, like, that's why I was like willing to just let go of any equity if things didn't pan out, if we didn't reach some threshold, that I would just be absolved of everything. And I felt confident in that, and I still to this day I wouldn't take anything back, even though we have had some hurdles with that property. But we, again, like you said, we still will do about what we thought we were going to do in our conservative underwriting in the first place.
That tells the story. And I mean, there was a huge hit on that deal, with the one unit and the loss of that square footage. But because the underwriting was so conservative, the deal in terms of what's going to be realized compared to the prospectus, it's right on target.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, I mean, that's proof in the pudding of a good partner or good group of partners to have that conservative mindset. And the same is true, and I try to approach my work the same way. It's always better to under-promise and over-deliver than the other way around.
For sure. For sure.
So.
Yeah. I think in this time, people are just trying to, they want investors. So they're trying to sell these returns. And I think a lot of people are realizing, like, the 15% return that they were preaching about ends up being a 4 or 5% return.
Right.
And it's like crazy.
I mean, you can get that safely right now in a treasury bond. I mean, it's like,
which is it's very interesting times. And I guess interesting. I mean, do you have any forecasts of where you think you see things going over the next 12 to 24 months?
I don't. I don't at all. And I probably should have better of a pulse on the economy and try to look at that thing. But the reality is nobody knows for sure.
No.
So for me, in my mindset, again, always looking at things from a risk-averse standpoint. I know I'm at a critical point where I'm probably maximizing my earning power. I mean, the way I look at it, maybe my business grows more. I think I'm certainly at the peak of being an employee. I'm not climbing a ladder anymore. I mean, I'm happy with what I'm doing, and when I'm done doing it, that's going to be it. So I think I'm probably at the peak of my earning power as an employee or maybe a business owner outside of being a real estate investor. So I'm focused on that. Okay, let me continue to do the best I can to maximize that. And from the investment strategy standpoint, I want to begin to accumulate, depositions of capital that have a decent enough cash-on-cash return to leave it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my mindset is, if I can get a reasonably safe 8% or more cash-on-cash return in an asset that I wouldn't feel bad about holding for more than 5 to 10 years. I want to be able to, over time, get the money put in those kind of deals and just keep them there. Because that ultimately is, if I can get that kind of return and get to the point where I've deployed enough capital in those types of deals or investments that stick, I mean, that's the path to financial freedom. But it's not easy to find those deals. Everybody talks about it. I go to meetups, so I won't invest in anything that doesn't have a 15% cash-on-cash return. Well, it's not like you go out tomorrow and find that. I mean, maybe once in a while you do. So for me, if I find these great deals, that we've looked at, that if they're eventually turn and realize will produce a much, much, much higher internal rate of return, I mean, that's fine. If I can continue to kind of jump the equity or net worth ladder that way, that's fine. But eventually I want to be able to get that capital in deals that aren't necessarily the higher value add, high internal rate of return deals, but are solid, good assets to provide stable cash-on-cash return. That's kind of the two-pronged strategy right now. If I find a good, short-term deal, that's great. But the focus is on eventually finding enough deals and investments that allow for that truly passive income.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And they're just set aside. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of my journey. I think, I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out for me.
Yeah.
I've learned so much, through life, both personally and professionally. So the other things I focus on is just continually trying to be better, be a better person, be better at what I do, be a better parent and better spouse, and meeting cool people along the way. And,
hey, man.
I certainly look forward to hopefully being able to work more with you and Chris, and it's been awesome getting to know you too. We've talked a lot about, things just aside from just the real estate investment piece.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And I love seeing you, building the personal brand too, because I think that's really important, obviously, to make you more attractive as a potential partner and leader in your field. Yeah. But it makes you a better person too.
Sure.
You get to connect with people and, help people in ways that maybe you didn't originally set out with an intent to do.
For sure. And that's kind of that's the goal with my life essentially is, of course I, want to make money, have a family to provide for, but I want to just provide so much value. And I don't know what that looks like in return, like what I'm going to get from any of that value per se, but I just want to be able to provide the value that other people have provided to me along the way, and I don't have a bill, for all of that. Like people have just done it just because, and I want to help the people that are like looking out and wanting to get into real estate or get into this and give them different perspectives. Maybe their path into real estate isn't my path.
Right.
Maybe it's your path where, you have active income. You're still, you're not 100% focused on real estate and investing, So I just want to, create some kind of a platform for people to be able to relate no matter what path they decide to take. In real estate, but collectively that we all know real estate's the best. But but yeah,
I love that approach, and it too. That mentorship is fulfilling, and it's a good way to give back. And I guess I'll be careful in how I say this because I don't want to knock all these experts and gurus in the real estate space, because it's not just real estate where this happens, but a lot of people find a path to coaching and mentoring in a paid sense, right? Because, people benefit from that. And I've had people tell me, in the space I'm in, oh, why don't you be like an executive or business coach or, set up like a mentoring program to help people get in the pharmaceutical industry. And I've had colleagues that have done that. I'm like, man, I don't feel like I should or want to have somebody pay me a bunch of money to give them guidance and advice they may or may not actually act on. But as in good faith, I do genuinely want to mentor people, and I do, to help them get better. And I love seeing you do the same too, right? So, you see a lot of, conferences and things like that where the end goal is to, continue to escalate people in various levels of coaching. But, those that do it with a true sense of altruism to help other people, that does come back to you in a benefit in time. But you can do a lot of good for people by just being there and being a good mentor. And certainly people that seek coaching and mentorship shouldn't just seek it without offering something in return. There are certainly ways to provide value to a mentor or coach, helping them a task if they want to learn. I've even thought about that with you and Chris too. Yes, I'm providing value in the form of capital to you guys as operators, but at the same time, I'd love to learn too. And maybe there's things I can be doing in these deals and things I've talked to Chris about where, hey, hopefully I can provide value and learn along the way. And one of them, that we may be looking at on the next deal is, okay, maybe I can do capital raising because I have a network and the type of work I do, with higher net income individuals. So I guess if that's the piece of advice I could lend to the audience here is, seek that guidance and mentorship and think of ways you can position yourself to be of value to people that are in the game where you can learn, but not suck somebody's time without providing any value to them.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's huge. It's huge. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on and telling everyone your story. And hopefully everyone gets a lot of value out of this and they kind of understand how possibly they can position themselves to entering the world of real estate. And yeah, man, I mean, thank you for sharing everything. And
oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
And look forward to being a part and seeing your journey as you kind of grow your business and further get into real estate and I can already see it that you're going to achieve this financial freedom no matter what. So
I appreciate that, Christian, and likewise, man. I'm really excited to see your path forward, and I think it's cool. I had no idea leaving the Columbia yesterday morning I was going to be in a recording studio. Yeah. I texted my wife. I was like, "Oh, I'm at the recording studio." I hadn't told her what we were. She's like, "What are you talking about? This is a random trip you made."
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Appreciate the audience.
Yeah, man. Of course. All right, you guys. Stay tuned until next time. My name's Christian. This is Aaron. Peace out.
See ya.